An ordinary grocery trip turned into a defining moment in a small Ohio neighborhood when an elderly woman made a racist comment to a young black man. What followed silenced the store and left everyone present profoundly changed. It was a sunny afternoon, and the grocery store buzzed with the usual activity. Shoppers browsed the aisles, some chatting, others lost in thought. Near the produce section, an elderly woman, likely in her late 70s, adjusted her glasses with a hint of impatience. She wore a faded cardigan, her silver hair neatly pinned, a picture of unassuming routine. Nearby, a young black man named Darrell reached for a bag of oranges, his casual blue hoodie and jeans blending seamlessly into the store's rhythm. His focus was split between texting on his phone and balancing a basket of groceries. The air changed when the woman noticed him. Her demeanor shifted, her eyes narrowed, and her lips tightened. Then, loudly enough for others to hear, she said, "You people don't belong here." Darrell froze mid-text. The words echoed in the space between them, and she pressed on, her tone sharp, "Why don't you go back to Africa where you came from?" A tense silence fell over the store, thick and heavy. Nearby shoppers stopped mid-motion, exchanging uneasy glances or pretending not to hear. The hum of daily errands screeched to a halt, leaving a void filled with the weight of her words. Darrell's first reaction was shock, his brow furrowing as he processed the moment. He seemed on the verge of an immediate response but held back, taking a deliberate breath. His face betrayed little emotion as he stood silently, weighing his next move. The woman, holding her apples, was unapologetic and defiant, her stance daring him to respond. The tension rippled outward. A young mother guided her child away, while an older man by the potatoes watched nervously. Even a store employee stacking bananas froze, uncertain whether to intervene. The cashier leaned slightly forward, trying to catch a glimpse of what was unfolding. Darrell stood still, the weight of the moment palpable. Slowly, he straightened, gripping his basket handle more firmly. His calmness seemed to expand his presence, drawing every gaze in the store. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady and deliberate. "Ma'am," he began, "do you even realize what you just said?" His tone wasn't confrontational, it invited reflection. But the woman dismissed the opportunity. "I said what I said," she snapped, her voice rising. "This is my country. People like you don't belong here." A gasp escaped a shopper nearby, and murmurs began to ripple through the gathering crowd. Yet Darrell remained composed. He didn't raise his voice or move closer. Instead, he let her words settle in the air for everyone to hear, their weight becoming undeniable. "All right," he said finally, nodding slowly, his calm disarming in its strength. "Let's talk about that, since you brought it up." He set his basket down carefully, the deliberate motion drawing the crowd tighter, every person a witness to what would come next. Darrell's calmness felt like a storm gathering, not one of fury, but of clarity and purpose. Even those pretending not to listen couldn't ignore the tension as Darrell fixed his gaze on the elderly woman, not with anger, but with a quiet determination that made her shift uncomfortably. "You said I don't belong here," he began, his voice steady but firm. "Let me tell you something about where I come from." Each word carried weight, spoken deliberately, as though chosen for this exact moment. "My great-great-grandfather was born in Mississippi," he said, pausing just enough for the words to sink in. "He was a sharecropper, working land he didn't own, breaking his back so his kids might have a better life." "His father?" "He was a slave, kidnapped, beaten, sold like property." "And for what?" "To help build the very country you're standing in." The woman's lips tightened, but she said nothing. The crowd, however, was transfixed. A man near the dairy section put his phone down entirely. An older couple whispered to each other but didn't look away. "My grandfather," Darrell continued, his voice gaining strength, "fought in World War II. He risked his life for this country, only to be treated like dirt when he came back. He couldn't sit at the same counters, couldn't drink from the same fountains. But he stayed. You know why? Because he believed in this country's promise, even when it didn't believe in him." The store seemed to hold its breath, even the hum of the refrigerators fading into the background. And my parents, Darrell went on, his tone softening but retaining its intensity, they fought too, not with guns or fists, but by working hard every day. They raised me to believe in kindness, respect, and the value of hard work. My mother's a teacher who's spent her life helping kids, no matter what they look like. My father's a mechanic, the kind of man who'd stop on the side of the road to help someone like you if your car broke down. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. His eyes locked on hers. So, you're telling me I don't belong here? That I should go back to Africa? His voice carried a note of sadness now. Ma'am, I am as much a part of this country as you are. Maybe even more, because my family paid the price for it in blood, sweat, and tears. The elderly woman's face flushed, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her apples. She opened her mouth to respond but seemed unable to form the words. Darrell took a step back, his composure unbroken. I could have walked away, he said, addressing the crowd now. But what good would that do? Ignorance doesn't get better in silence. It's up to all of us to be better than this, to be better than words like those. The room remained silent, the weight of his words pressing on everyone present. For a moment, no one moved. The elderly woman's expression shifted, anger giving way to something closer to shame. She glanced around as if searching for support, but none came. Then, a middle-aged man in a baseball cap stepped forward. He's right, the man said, his voice breaking the quiet. We've got to be better than this. His words seemed to break a spell. An older woman near the frozen foods aisle nodded. My dad fought in that same war, she said softly, her voice trembling. He always said the only color that mattered was the red on the flag. Murmurs of agreement spread. A young cashier called out from her station, I've never seen anyone handle something like that so gracefully. Thank you. The elderly woman, now visibly flustered, clutched her cart tightly. She didn't apologize, but the fire in her eyes had dimmed. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, almost pleading. I didn't mean. She started, but the words trailed off. Darrell turned back to her, his expression softer. It's not about what you meant, he said gently. It's about how it came across. Words matter. Actions matter even more. A man from the deli counter began clapping, hesitantly at first. Others joined in, the applause swelling into a wave of support, not just for Darrell's words, but for the courage it took to confront hate with dignity. The elderly woman looked around one last time, her face pale, before quietly wheeling her cart toward the exit. As she left, a few people approached Darrell. A woman placed a hand on his shoulder and said, Thank you for saying what needed to be said. Darrell offered a faint smile, lifting his basket. Sometimes, he said, almost to himself, it's not about winning or losing. It's about making sure people hear the truth. The crowd began to disperse, the tension in the air replaced by a quiet sense of reflection. Some looked inspired, others thoughtful. But one thing was certain, no one would leave that grocery store unchanged. But everyone seemed changed in some small way. The moment had passed, but the impact of Darrell's words lingered. As the crowd returned to their routines, the atmosphere in the grocery store felt different, quieter, more thoughtful. Darrell finished his shopping, his steps measured, as if he were still processing everything that had just happened. The weight of the moment hadn't shaken him, but it had left him reflective. At the checkout line, the young cashier who had spoken up earlier scanned his items with a shy smile. What you said back there, she hesitated, then continued, it meant a lot. People don't always stand up like that, especially with such grace. Darrell smiled back, his tone warm. Sometimes grace is the only way to break through. Anger just builds walls. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the parking lot. As Darrell walked to his car, he noticed the elderly woman sitting in hers, gripping the steering wheel tightly. For a moment, he considered walking over to her but decided against it. Some lessons take time to settle, and he had already said what needed to be said. Later that evening, Daryl sat with his father at the kitchen table, recounting the day's events. His father, a man of few words, listened intently, his hands folded on the table. "You did the right thing, son," his father said finally. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who was watching. People like her, she might not change overnight, but you planted a seed. That's all you can do sometimes. Plant the seed and let it grow." Daryl nodded, his father's words resonating deeply. He realized that, while the encounter had been uncomfortable, it had been necessary. Ignorance doesn't change unless it's confronted, and silence only allows it to fester. Across town, the elderly woman sat at her dining table, staring at the untouched plate of food in front of her. Daryl's words replayed in her mind, each one cutting through the armor of her assumptions. She thought of her own grandchildren, of the world they were growing up in, and for the first time, she felt a pang of something unfamiliar, doubt. In the days that followed, the story of what had happened at the grocery store spread through the neighborhood. People talked about Daryl's response, his courage, and the dignity with which he handled the situation. It became more than just an incident, it became a lesson, a reminder of the power of words and the importance of standing up for what's right. Daryl didn't seek attention for what he'd done, but his actions rippled through the community in ways he hadn't expected. Strangers approached him with gratitude, sharing their own stories of prejudice and resilience. His quiet stand had sparked conversations that had long been avoided. The elderly woman, too, began to change. It wasn't immediate, but she started to question the beliefs she had held for so long. She didn't know if she'd ever see Daryl again, but if she did, she hoped she'd have the courage to apologize. Moments like these remind us of the power of kindness, strength, and truth in the face of ignorance. They teach us that standing up doesn't always mean shouting. It can mean speaking calmly with conviction and letting the truth do the rest. To everyone watching, let this be a reminder, your words and actions matter. They can hurt or they can heal. They can divide or they can unite. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Together, we can spread messages of hope, courage, and understanding to create a better world.